Hi, I'm Alane Adams, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Alane Adams.
You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com. And when you're there, please click on the links on the right-hand sidebar to subscribe to the show. That way you don't miss an episode. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We're going to be telling you about them throughout the show for making the show possible. If you would like to sponsor the show, go to hankgarner.com and click on the link to advertise. It's up in the top menu bar. There's a brand new collection I'd like to tell you about. It's called Chronicles of Mirestone. And right now, it is available for pre-order for only 99 cents, and that's through December 1st. Go grab it before then, because you will not want to miss this collection. 200 years ago, the Dwarven clans and the Elvish houses of Mirestone were at peace. The king of the dwarves, in a selfish and greedy move, used his wizards to expand their mountain empire, raising new peaks from the forest floors of their elven neighbors. War and hatred ensued. The Chronicles of Mirestone offers a glimpse into the lives of the elves and dwarves living in the aftermath as they seek for a new peace. 6 talented authors lend their voices to a tale of destruction, mistrust, and hope. The Chronicles of Mirestone, go grab it right now at the wonderful pre-order price of only 99 cents. There's a link in the show notes. We knew it would be bad, but there are levels of bad. There was no scale that could have measured this one. Residents listened as 130-mile-per-hour winds tore away their roofs and struggled to stay alive as water crept into their homes, threatening to drown people in their living rooms. When the winds died and the rain finally stopped, the streets were only navigable by boat. The death toll rose to over 70, and more than 1 million cars flooded with an estimate of $100 billion in destruction. How does a community, a city, a state survive when hit by a monster storm and then have every square inch covered by over 4 feet of water? A storm which can only be described as a 1,000-year flooding event, worse than Hurricane Katrina, and broke all historical records. Lived through one man's experience as the world grew more and more uncertain. Experienced through the medium of social media the day-by-day visceral experience of watching people's lives permanently altered, and the heart-filling moments when strangers, neighbors, and friends stepped up and helped those in trouble. Watch as needs are met, lives preserved, and hope restored in the 2 months following Harvey. Get your signed paperback copy of 2 Months with Harvey by Terry R. Hill. Go to terryrhill.net. Proceeds from this project are going to benefit people still struggling in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. terryrhill.net. 2 Months with Harvey. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to bring Alane Adams to the show. Alane is a celebrated children's author with some fantastic books. I have personal experience that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But welcome to the show, Alane.
Hey, Hank, thanks so much for having me this morning. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We're going to get into all kinds of good stuff in a minute, but before we do, we begin the show with the same question every time, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
Oh, I was probably about 5 years old, and I was already scribbling little stories down in books. And I remember sort of rewriting a version of the Three Little Pigs, if you don't mind, in my own version. And I colored in some pictures, and I wrote the words, and I stapled it together. And, it really was the first book that I wrote, and that dream really never changed for me.
Oh, that's so awesome. in the last 20 shows or so that I've recorded, there have to be at least 7 or 8 of those that have told me that they started making their own books when they were little and stapling paper together, and I find that so awesome.
It's an affliction we have.
Yeah, it's that's a step farther than just making up games for your siblings to play and making them play a role, and kind of being the storyteller like that. When you start binding books, that's next level stuff.
Yeah, right.
So, were you a big reader when you were young?
Huge reader. I mean, my earliest memories are, of my mom always taking me to the library and just pouring up and down the rows and stacking up books, and just always been a huge reader. I always tell kids when I travel to schools that if they want to grow up to be a writer, they have to read constantly, different books, different genres. We would go on long car trips, and I had 3 brothers, so I read probably every Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey Western, there was, and my mom would have all these romance novels. I read through all of those. I read fantasies, science fiction, Heinlein, you name it. There really wasn't a book I wouldn't read.
I love it. I don't come across many women that when they were girls read Louis L'Amour. That's I love that. Right? Yeah.
So 3 brothers. Okay, I was the youngest. I always say I was raised by wolves. Okay, and my family. We were taken out hunting and camping in Mexico on the beach for weeks at a time, and I had a very, very rough and tumble kind of family that loved to be outdoors, and of course the boys loved to read those westerns.
Yeah, growing up in the rural South, I think there's a lot of similarities there. If you didn't. If you couldn't get out of the house and go, survive in the woods for a few days, you were going to have a miserable experience.
Right, yeah. Right.
Oh, that's so funny. So what types of stories really captured your imagination? I know you talked about a lot of different genres there, but was there a connecting thread throughout all those stories that, was it mystery? Was it adventure? Was there something there that just really kind of called to you?
Yeah, definitely fantasy. There's nothing to me greater than diving into a fantasy realm, world building. Tolkien is probably one of the greatest world builders. This last century of creating the Lord of the Rings world. I remember reading that in middle grade, junior high, and just falling into that world and being so consumed by it. And I think it's really been one of my. I sort of have a dual personality. I love writing children's books and creating fantasy realms, but I also like the Dean Koontz, Stephen King. I also grew up reading those. So part of me really still wants to write also someday when I have more time, like the, that kind of psycho serial killer kind of novel too for grown-ups. So I kind of really like both, to be honest.
Well, that's a weird thing, but a common thing. Lots of writers from all over the genre spectrum all kind of cut their teeth on Tolkien, and I find that fascinating. But like you said, the world building I think is what really attracts us, and also the kind of feeling of disconnection that we could escape a little bit and live out scenarios that we just wouldn't get to. I think that's one of the allures of fantasy, and maybe that's one of the allures of kind of the psycho thrillers as well, because we get to explore things that you and I would never have any reason to come in contact with, maybe.
Hopefully, right? Yeah,
hopefully.
Not. We get to only explore them in books. I love to tell kids the story about how, the Chronicles of Narnia and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe reminds me so much of reading. You talked about how we escape, when we read a book. And I tell kids that, when you open the pages of a book, it's kind of like when Lucy Pevensey opens up the doors to the wardrobe and she enters into this magical realm of Narnia, right? And it's just like you step into the pages of the book and you enter into that magical realm. And while you're there, and while Lucy's in Narnia, right, she has the most amazing adventures, and she does all these amazing things and experiences and sees all these wonderful things. And when she's done, she comes back through the wardrobe, just like we come back to our real world. As we close the pages, she leaves the wardrobe. And then I always say to kids, so now Lucy's back in the world, but is she the same person, and they say no. And I said, exactly, because she's been changed by her adventures the same way that we are changed by the adventures that we experience through reading the books.
I couldn't have said it any better. I think we can just go ahead and wrap the show now. So thanks for tuning in. That's it.
Hey, right. There's more. There's more
no,
to
no,
talk
no.
about. I know.
I love that. I love that. You're absolutely right. And I was, as you were talking, I was thinking, man, I love portal fantasy and the idea of going somewhere. But that's always a common theme: is the traveler's never the same when they come back. Kind of like Frodo in Lord of the Rings is never the same after his adventure. That the Shire just can't contain him anymore. And
Exactly.
yeah, and kind of our mundane life can't contain us anymore after we, have read these books and been on these adventures. I love it. I was reading through your bio, and something stuck out to me and kind of made me laugh a little bit. At your misfortune, you said that you wanted to be an English major, but your family convinced you to be an accountant. What happened?
Oh, I know. It was a terrible tragedy, right? So I was, when I was in high school, I have a family business, and my family have always been kind of in different businesses. And my oldest brother, who's kind of the one that I look up to, I blame all of this on him, of course. I said to him one day, George, what do you think? I'm thinking about majoring in English, and his answer was, well, however will you make any money? Because that's always been. I have a very entrepreneurial family, and it just kind of, back in the day, it was kind of hard to make a living at writing or English, and it just was kind of a dream and a fantasy. But it's what I always tell kids when I go to schools is, in order to have a dream come true, you got to have a champion. You got to have someone that believes in you. If you want to get to the NFL, if you want to be the next American Idol, if you want to go to college, you have to have someone that pushes you and supports you and really, encourages you in your dream. And so, of course, not having that, I took a left turn. I was smart, I could do well in school, and so I became an accountant. But, I got really lucky because about 5 years ago, I found a champion, and in my corner, and that was really my son, who was 12 at the time. And he's the one who encouraged me and supported me and badgered me endlessly, to write a book that he could read. And that's, really what turned it all around for me when I was finally able to commit full time to that dream that I'd always wanted to do, but just could never find the resilience, to see it all the way through fruition.
Wow. Did your son know that you had this dream, or was he just...
he knew. Yeah, exactly. I had left the business by now, and I was teaching at university, and I was doing all these different things. I was traveling all over the world. I was visiting schools with UNICEF and World Vision, and just traveling, just trying to understand why the world was the way it was. And one of the things I learned in all my travels was, that reading is a superpower. Okay, hands down. If you visit a developing country, a school there, and you ask a child what they want to be, they will invariably say teacher, because the teacher had that magic power, right, that their parents didn't have, and most people in their remote village might not have. And that was the power to read. And reading was just kind of this ability to communicate, right, with the outside world. And I kind of took from that, and as I was kind of layering in how I wanted to spend my life and starting my foundation. I have a foundation called the Rise Up Foundation that supports all my literacy projects and donations that I make to schools all over the country. And it just kind of helped me put it all together. And then my son comes out of the blue because I thought I was going to write those important novels, the Dean Koontz or the Stephen King, the really cool adult novels. And then he's like, write me a kid's book. And then, of course, here's my naivete. I think to myself, well, how hard could it be, right? It's a kid's book, which, of course, is very naive, okay? Because, of course, writing for children is just as hard, if not harder, than writing for adults. But what it triggered, Hank, was just this passion and this project between the two of us. We had so much fun creating the book series, The Legends of Orkney. It was a fantasy-based series, which is what he loved, which is what I loved, based in Norse mythology, and we just had the greatest time. But I got to tell you, it wasn't easy because he would not let up. I mean, it was every day, Mom, you're going to finish it, right? Mom, is it done? Mom, you're working on it, right? Mom, don't slack off, Mom. So if you think I was ever going to quit that time, I didn't have a chance. And that's why I say I was just so fortunate to have that cheerleader, to have that person that really believed in me and supported my dream and encouraged me to just, see it all the way through.
He took champion to the next level. That's
yeah. You got that. Yeah. And but that's really what prompted the start of it. But then also these picture book series, the Santa Thieves series that we're going to talk about, that also came around at the same exact time. My those stories are based on stories my dad told me growing up in 1920s Pennsylvania.
Oh wow. I definitely want to jump to that in just a second, but you completely glossed over that you worked with children all around the world and with UNICEF and did you say World Vision folks doing magnificent work. How did you go from accountant in the family business to traveling the world teaching children?
Well, I finally told my brother I quit. I finally said after so many years of
I've had it, George.
left brain, right brain. Our company had grown to be quite large. I had taken it through an extensive merger, and truthfully, I could replace myself as the chief financial officer, and I felt like it was the right time for me to finally really discover my life and what I wanted to do with my time, what I truly wanted to do with my time, and I had the freedom at that point to be able to do it. And so I kind of set off on a journey to kind of discover what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I started traveling with UNICEF and visiting other countries. I went to Angola. I went to, which is a very interesting place. I went to Laos and I went to Nepal, and I traveled all over South America, and I climbed some mountains. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro for fun, and I visited Serbia, Eastern Europe with World Vision, and I just had a chance to really discover the world and understand global poverty. I got a master's degree in international relations at the time, or diplomacy, just to kind of really understand, the world, so I could figure out what impact I was going to have, and how I was going to make a difference, how I could use my life and my time and my talent to sort of impact children.
I love it. That first book series that you wrote because your son pestered you to do so, The Legends of Orkney. Tell me about how that came to be. Some of these legends and things are stuff that me and my kids have talked about over the years, being of Irish and Scottish heritage, and tracing some roots back to the Orkney Islands, and it's this magical place during this magical time, and that you kind of get the idea of these people huddled around fires in the cold months telling stories, and these fascinating stories come out of there. Why did you choose Orkney, and kind of how did you take those old legends and make something fresh and new out of it?
So, it's a great question. Orkney, is a real place. Those are islands
Yes.
off the coast of Scotland, as
Right.
you're familiar with. And I was doing a lot of research. I knew my son, he loved all the Percy Jackson series. So again, when you're trying to figure out a book, who are you writing for? That's the first question. Who's your audience? My audience was my 12-year-old son. So then you're trying to think of, okay, what kind of a story does he want to read? Well, he loved the mythology stories. So at the time, Rick hadn't yet written any of the Norse mythology stories. So I thought that would be a really fun area to explore. And not only that, there's a lot of crossover to some other things that my son liked. He loved the Merlin series. I don't know if you ever watched that BBC series they had on a few years back, but it was a great series. It was so fun, and we loved to watch that. And so he had real interest in King Arthur and kind of those legends. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of King Arthur crossover to Orkney, the Orcadian soldiers, and I think some of Morgana's family came from the Orkney area. And so I just kind of drew me over there. And as I was doing research, I came across some really interesting mythology there and folklore. So not only did the Norse pass right by the Orkney Islands in their journey, so therefore they scattered, Norse culture all over the Orkney Islands. They have all kinds of legends around Odin's stone and different things there. But they also had a lot of local folklore about witches. And for me, that was just fascinating, because I was trying to come up with a character that would be interesting to my son. And I tell the story a lot, but he's a really nice kid, by the way, but his favorite movie of all time is Star Wars Episode 3, which happens to be the one, I don't know if you're familiar with the universe
I know.
but happens to be the one where Anakin goes full on dark side, okay, and becomes Darth Vader, right? And this was my son's favorite character, was Anakin, and I'm like, and again, I say he's such a sweet kid, but what I knew was like a one-dimensional character wasn't going to do for him. He needed something, with more of an edge to it, a darker version, say, of a Percy Jackson character. So as I was doing my research, it occurred to me, what if I created a character who's a descendant of Odin? So sure, that gives him the magic of the gods, just like Percy's a descendant of Poseidon. So my character is a descendant of Odin, gives him all that magic of the gods. But what about his mom? he has two bloodlines. And so I went ahead and I created a bloodline for him that comes from his mother, who happens to be a witch. And she's not just a witch, but like the descendant of the last great, most powerful, evilest, darkest witch in all witchdom, called Rubicus, a character I created. So now my character has duology, right? Light and darkness battling for control inside of them, and which bloodline will prevail. And that's kind of basis for the story. And I don't know if you've been to Orkney or you've seen the stories, but they have those standing stones, those stones that they get set in the sand, right? Well, they actually had local folklore around these stones. It's called the Ring of Brogar. And the local folklore said there might be witches trapped inside the stone. So, it was like a home run for me to be able to take, this place, Orkney, and this folklore, and just weave all of that into this story and combine the folklore and the mythology together to create a really fascinating world.
I'm sold. I'm going to order the trilogy as soon as we're done. That sounds amazing. So was he, when you, well, first off, how long did it take you to write that first book?
So, it was about 80,000 words, and I typically write about 1,000 words a day. And mind you, my son was, he was cracking the whip. I'm not going to lie. He was pushing me pretty hard, and every day nagging me and convincing me to move on. And so I had a lot of fun with it. But it's funny what you don't know when you're first sort of starting out. And so I really wrote the draft for him in about 3 to 4 months, and then I printed it up for him, and I bound it together, with this lovely cardboard homemade cover for him, and I presented to him with this great fanfare, okay, my darling, here you go, here's your book, and of course, he went into his room for a few hours, read it, and then he comes back out, hands it back to me, and he says, okay, yeah, that was really good, where's the next one?
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, excuse me, hello, what about, oh, Mom, you're so amazing. Oh, Mom, let's talk about this for a couple weeks. Oh, Mom, let's just download this whole book. I can't believe nothing. Okay, what I got was, yeah, I really like that. I need to know what happens next. So when are you going to finish the next one? So, I mean, Hank, it really, truly was just like that. He just pestered me, and I thought I was going to get a break, but I didn't. There's no rest for the wicked. Careful what you wish for. Oh, I really want to become an author, right? Anyway, so I did. I wrote because the same thing happened when I wrote the second one. 6 months later, I gave him the second one, and then 6 months later, I gave him the third and final book, and I said, "That's it. I'm done. Okay, I got that's it." But that was just the beginning. I hadn't taken the time yet to edit them and polish them and really put them through, the rigor of what you need to do. And I think that's really what differentiates people that want to be an author and people that actually go on to become authors, is that the work that takes place between the creative process, which, by the way, is a lot of fun. It's like a big party in your brain. You're just having so much fun creating, and there's just no room for criticism. There's no room for doubt. There's no, if you start to criticize your work midway, it just dies, right? You can't go on. You think it's stupid, and then all of a sudden it's dead to you, right? So what I really learned is creativity only flourishes when it's nurtured and it's supported, and there's a time for the critic to come in, and the critic comes in when you have a finished manuscript. So
sure.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time polishing the series and taking it to the next level and fixing all my amateur mistakes, and really taking in advice from experts in the field and trying to move forward with it.
Did you, because you were a voracious reader, you obviously were, well versed in fantasy and knew how stories felt as a reader. But as a writer, what were some of the things that surprised you, or maybe obstacles you bumped up against that you maybe never anticipated?
It is, world building is hard. There's just so many different elements that have to go into it, and I think you can't rush through that. I think that's what you really learn is that it sounds good in your head, and it sounds complete in your head. But I had a chance to work with a guy by the name of Brent Friedman, who's he's he's done a lot of video game design work over the years in some really famous games, and he spent a lot of time working with me on specifically just on world building and helping me to kind of understand, what elements need to take place and visually and being able to hear, see, and smell, sort of the world around you, and to take the moments, the bigger moments, and draw them out. I'm a speed reader, speed talker, speed writer. You know what I mean? Everything's fast, fast, fast for me. So what I really learned in the process was to really slow down and to take the moments that the reader needs to enjoy, to really savor and to really slow those moments down and lengthen them out, where I would have just said it in 3 sentences or something, to get, oh yeah, this happened, and I really learned patience and just the elements I think that you need to have an interesting and complete, complex world that's unique and fresh.
The other side of that, Alane, is that learning to write with an economy of words so that you don't use too many words, while at the same time giving the scene, enough detail and character and color. That can be a razor thin line to walk sometimes.
Absolutely, and not repeating yourself, especially because the first book is called The Red Sun, so you can only imagine how many times the word red was in my manuscript. One of the editors said, seriously, I will put my finger in my eye if I see the word red again, okay? It's like, use a different word, okay? And it's just, again, it's funny what you don't know. You get these bad habits that develop in your writing, but as you learn them, you can eliminate them. I have entire lists of sort of, bad habits of grammar or a repetitive use of the word just or like or whatever it might be, because or and then or began to, because in your mind as you're writing, you see somebody begin to move and begin to do this, and so you start writing it that way, because as very often the story is unfolding for you in the moment as you're writing it, and you see it visually and mentally as the word, as it's getting to your fingers. And so those are all great things. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just you've got to go back. That's why I say that a true writer is the one that recognizes that writing is rewriting, and rewriting and rewriting until it's published. And then you say, dear Lord, I never want to see this again. I never want to read this book ever again in my life, because I've read it so many times.
Oh man. And it looks like the series was very well received, both critically and with readers. How did that make you feel?
It's been really rewarding. It's always nice to win awards and to get recognition for the books, and to see that that you did it right. You did a good. It's really hard to know if you've done a good job or not. But honestly, my goal is to please children, and so I'm always at a loss to know, like, when an adult criticizes the book, critiques the book, or maybe doesn't find it interesting or doesn't care for it. And I think, well, you're 40. I don't know. I didn't write it for you. So is it fair? And I think, well, as long as my 10 to 15-year-old readers love it, I'm going to be okay. And those are really ultimately the people that I try to please, and the ones that I want to entertain, the ones that I want to think, that my book is good. But yeah, that's the price of being an author. Today is everyone wants to tell you what they think. And unfortunately, a lot of kids don't leave reviews, but a lot of adults like to leave reviews. And fortunately, like I said, I've had some good reviews and good awards for the series, and that's been affirming. And I'm really excited to kind of be able to, I don't want to say like leave it behind me, but it's kind of like my junior varsity coming out, series. And I'm really excited for what's kind of coming up next for me as I've learned and grown as a writer. I mean, I even feel like the third book, The Raven God, just came out in September. I feel like, that book improved so much over the first 2 books as I really knew my characters and also knew my audience, made it very friendly, very, engaging for those kids in middle grade. That is really my target sweet spot audience.
Awesome. How old is your son now?
Oh, he is 17 now and does not think I'm as cool as he used to. But yeah, he's a senior in high school. He was 12 when 12 and a half, I think, when all of this started. And he's 17 now. So.
Oh, what a heartbreaking day when you're not the cool one anymore.
I'm used to
but it happens.
Yeah.
But they do come back around. So yeah, our oldest is 22 now, and
Got it.
And yeah, they come back around.
Yeah.
But anyway, so You talked about that writing for kids is difficult because kids typically are not the ones that are plopping down the money for the books. Therefore, they're not the ones leaving reviews. Typically, you've now transitioned into, you've got this great series of younger kids' books, these picture books, and you're brand new, and The Santa Thief is out, and Merry Christmas, It's Almost Christmas. Good grief, the year has gotten away from us yet again. But I can only imagine that as your audience gets younger, those challenges increase of getting the product to the audience and then getting feedback from. As we dig into that, how did you get started doing younger children's picture books?
I was really fortunate to get to spend some time. My dad is 96 right now, as a matter of fact. He's 96, and he lives with me now. But he was always a go-getter. We had that entrepreneur, worked every day of his life, and then a few years ago, and he had a quite interesting life. World War II vet, and just a lot of great experience. He grew up in Pennsylvania, and so he was born in 1921, and so he grew up at a very interesting time in American history. His parents were immigrants from Europe, escaping kind of World War I at the time. Their family sent him here, and so very poor kind of immigrant family, and he grew up on a farm. And a few years ago, when he was probably about 92, I guess, and he'd slowed down. He wasn't driving anymore. I asked him for the first time, don't ask me why it took me so long to get around to it, but I asked him to tell me about his childhood. And, I'd always heard the war stories and the business stories and whatnot, but I guess I'd never really gotten from him childhood stories and facts and elements of his childhood. And the very first story he told me was about stealing coal. And the trains would come into town and along the tracks, and the coal would fall off the train, or they could jump on the train, as it was rumbling through, and they used the coal to heat the house and everything. And he just told me the story, and I found it fascinating. And I thought it would make a really interesting children's story if I could kind of turn it into sort of a Robin Hood, where they kind of steal the coal, but then they give it away. And I ultimately was really able to turn it into a really lovely kind of moral fable about, what happens. First of all, when kids read the series, they get to see what life is like. They get to see the kitchen, doesn't have, I always ask the kids, does this look like your kitchen? No. Doesn't have a microwave, no TV, no computer, and they get to understand kids grew up very differently. And there's a scene where Georgie has a hole in his boot. And I ask him, why does he have a hole in his boot? And I get them to understand there were no Targets or Walmarts. I tell them there wasn't no Amazon Prime bringing boxes to your house every day. They had to get by with maybe one pair of shoes a year, and so they really get a sense of what life was like. And then when his friend kind of bullies him into stealing the coal, it gives a moral dilemma. And I always ask the kids right at that moment, I stop and I say, what would you do? Here's Georgie on top of the train. His friend is telling him if he doesn't steal the coal, he's going to tell on him. And I ask him what they would do. And everyone to a T will say, I'm going to run home. I'm going to tell my mom. I'm going to tell the conductor. And so then I say to them, oh, well, so you guys are all angels. No one here has ever been in trouble. And then they kind of stop and go, wait, no, I've been in trouble. Wait, I've made mistakes before. And I kind of get them to understand that, we all make mistakes, and it's about, what we do with it. And then Papa shows up and helps Georgie take the coal because they can't give it back because the train's gone now. And they take the coal around and give it to, people that need it. And Georgie learns a valuable lesson. So, that was really the start of that. And I was able to turn it into a beautiful picture book. And I still am in awe. I don't draw pictures, okay? I have no talent for art. But my illustrator, Lauren Gallegos, is amazing. And she just really brought the story to life for me.
Nick Breaker's book Essence, Book One Septima, one of the best science fiction writers I know. Nick Breaker weaves some of the best science fiction adventure stories you'll ever read. Essence, Book One Septima is a must-read. Go pick it up today. There's a link to it in the show notes. Third Scribe is the place for authors and readers to meet. Go to ThirdScribe.com. You can set up an account for free, and you can link up with some of your favorite authors and find out what's going on with them. Authors, you need to have a place where you can highlight your books to your audience. ThirdScribe.com is built especially around books, linking people that love books with people that write books. Go visit them today. ThirdScribe.com. Tell Rob and the folks that I sent you. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. Episode 20 just dropped today. It is amazing, with stories by Jess West, Rhett Bruno, Eamon Ambrose, Bob Williams. Tales is my favorite monthly publication. Go pick it up today and get that old pulp goodness feeling. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, episode number 20, out right now. Chronicle World's Tales of Dystopia, 13 stories of animals and humans interacting at the end of the world. This project also benefits Pets for Vets, one of the most outstanding charities out there, linking up rescue animals with veterans that need some companionship. So go pick up a copy of Chronicle World's Tales of Dystopia. It's only 99 cents while it launches. At the end of the show, don't forget we have an audiobook clip from Richard Cleaves, the Jason Crane series. Was your illustrator Lauren, was she someone that you knew already, or is this someone that your publisher put you together with?
You know, I was able to connect with her. We have a great thing called the Society of Children Writers, Children Book Writers and Illustrators, and artists like her can put up their portfolio. And, initially I just kind of wanted to bring this book to life, for my dad. I thought this was a few years ago now. And I thought, he was I didn't know how long he was going to be around, because he was in his 90s. Every year he surprises me, okay? Oh, 93, this is probably going to be the last, 94, probably the 95th birthday, probably the last one. And we just celebrated his 96th birthday. So I have a feeling at this point he's going to outlive us all or live to be 100. But I was able to connect with her, and she was also local, so we could kind of meet, and I could tell her, I introduced her to my dad, and she got a real sense of the story and some pictures of him when he was, 8 years old at the age of the character in the book. And so it's really was a great project. When you do a picture book like that, it is quite a collaboration, because you write the words, and there's only 900 words or so it's not that many words. But then, the illustrator draws the pictures, and then it's kind of a dance, I call it, like back and forth, where she draws the pictures, and then I may amend the words to better match the pictures, and she works on the pictures to match the words, and we kind of go back and forth, hammering it all out, smoothing it out, taking as many words away as you can, so that it's, the bare bones of really what you need to make it a beautiful story, and let the illustrations do a lot of the telling. And
we talked a little bit earlier about, how you assumed that writing a kid's book was going to be easy. And I would think that after doing your kind of middle grade YA series that you did, kind of moving down to this lower age group, does that become more difficult as the story compresses and you're depending more on the visuals? What are some of the challenges that come with writing a story for smaller kids?
Yeah, it's interesting because these stories, these picture books, like there are some picture books that are meant to be kind of silly or rhyming and things like that. And my books are a little bit more for this maybe second to third graders. They do K through 3, but so there's a few more words, and they're not rhyming or necessarily silly. They're telling a story, maybe more of a heartwarming story. And so it's a little bit different, I think, exercise than some of the very sweet or kind of silly picture books that we see. And so there's a few more words maybe than normal, and dialogue and conversation, between Georgie and his papa or his mom. And but again, it's you have to be so sparing with your words, and you are relying very much on the picture to tell a lot of the story. So the word and the picture must complement each other perfectly, and that I think is probably just the biggest challenge, is really discerning. I mean, I know what I want it to say, but I know what the picture shows, but just exactly how to capture the story in words so that it really does marry well with the pictures and doesn't overshadow the picture or take the place of the picture, be repetitive. So I find it easy to write the story, but then once I have the pictures and the illustrations and the words on the page, I spend probably far more time than I ever did writing the story, trying to make it just perfect for the balance of words and pictures.
That was going to be my next question. Is there a give and take, a push and pull between the the script writing, if you will, and the illustrations, and then once the illustrations are finished, is there an editing process that hones and refines that?
Absolutely. And so we go back and forth. I mean, the entire illustrating process starts with most picture books are 32 pages. There's sort of a printing dynamic that's divided by 4, and because of the accordion pages and stuff. So your typical picture book is 32 pages, and they're typically anywhere from 600 to 1,000 words, with 800 or 900 being maybe close to the average. So you kind of know the parameters, and my illustrator is very well, is very experienced. So I don't tell her what to do. She knows how to work with me. We're on our 4th picture book together now, and so I give her the manuscript. It's only 2 or 3 pages, and she breaks it down into the 32 page full page spread, half page spread, little like circular kind of like drawings, so that there's a nice blend, so that you're not just looking at the same thing page after page. You've got a half page here, you've got a full 2 page spread here, you've got 3 or 4 little cutout drawings on this page, and then she spaces, kind of breaks it up that way as she visualizes it. And then I definitely get to be able to tell her, yeah, it's not what I wanted this, or I want this color scheme, or I want it, like I'm doing the Circus Steve. That's the book that's coming out next year. I really wanted an elephant. I need an elephant on this page. Okay, give me an elephant. And so we can, but we're just in the drawing stage, the sketching stage. And then once her sketches are approved, then we go into the more final drawing stage. And then once that's approved, we get into the colorizing stage. And every step of the way, if there's anything that needs to be adjusted, she can fix it. And then she'll actually do hand-painted drawings of each. She'll take the illustration, actually paint over it to give it that depth and perfection of detail that she ascribes to.
I love it. We got your publisher sent us a copy of The Santa Thief a week or so ago, and over this past weekend, our niece came over and loaned us her 2 small children for the weekend, and we babysat them and had a great time with them, as we always do. But my wife went and got this book, and she said she gave it to the older of the 2, Delaney, a little girl, and said, I want you to look at this book and tell me what you think about it. And she read it, and she got her little brother Dylan to sit down, and she read it to him, and then Dylan got the book, and he read it from cover to cover, and they put it away and did something else. And then I came in. I had been out doing something out in the office, and I came back in, and Delaney said, Uncle Hank, I want you to sit down. I want to read this book to you. and we started all over again, and we did this, like 3 or 4 different times over the weekend, and they just absolutely loved it. And which is all wonderful, but they don't write Amazon reviews. So,
well, you can, Hank. Go ahead.
I can.
Okay.
Yes, and I will. But what are the challenges to when you're dealing with an audience this young? How do you get your work out to them? I'm assuming that you rely a lot on individual interaction between yourself and groups of kids. Kind of how do the business gears have to change when you're dealing with this age group and this genre?
One of the things that's really unique about this age group and genre is the fact that there's not a lot of ebook sales there. So whereas in most adult novels, there's a healthy balance of ebook sales. It's very easy to get your ebook out there, and it's easy for them to pick it up. But when it comes to children's books, you're still dealing with hardcover, which means that a person needs to kind of see it, touch it, feel it in the store and pick it up. And so that's a little bit more of a challenge sometimes. People tend to, moms, dads of young children tend to go to the bookstore or the library and pick up books that way, and they're not necessarily just sitting on Amazon and ordering them. So distribution becomes important, and also just getting word of your book out there. I do a lot of social media and promotion of the books. I also have, like The Coal Thief. People also are familiar with my series. The Coal Thief was unique because I had done a literacy partnership with the Screen Actors Guild Foundation, and they do something called Storyline Online, which is they take a famous actor or actress and they record a picture book, have them reading a picture book, and they do a video of it with a little bit of animation from the picture book. And they've had Rita Moreno and Kevin Costner, and so I was fortunate enough to have Christian Slater, who's a great actor. He's starring in Mr. Robot right now, and he read The Coal Thief last year. So in the last year, it's had over almost 1 million views. And each view generally represents a classroom. So you're talking anywhere from 20 to 30 kids that might be watching, that video because they're shown in classrooms all over. They get about 4.5 million downloads at their website from schools all over the world. So, it's a great feeling to know that. I'll run into teachers all the time or kids and like, oh, I saw your book in the classroom, And so that's really sort of helped establish kind of that series. But The Santa Thief is, it's a holiday specific book. So it's also got a very short sort of shelf life, right? It's going to be on sale, November to December, and then you're probably not going to buy it in January. So, but the other side of it is you're still going to probably bring it out for several years, in a row, because it does have that short shelf life. So you'll probably bring it out every year at this time.
Excellent. What are when you're dealing when you create a character like Georgie in these books, and how do you keep the momentum of a series like that going? I know that you're pulling a lot from your dad's stories. Do you sit down and kind of brainstorm? Okay, what kind of situation can I put him in this time? Is there? Do you have an overarching message that you're thinking about when you start planning these, or is it just kind of the next story that comes to mind?
Yeah, I didn't intend for them initially when I set out to think about these. I didn't really intend for them to all have kind of this sort of sweet moral, message to them. But that just seems to be how I, as a writer, that tends, I guess that's sort of how I write them. And so you don't realize that going into it, but that's what comes out the other end is sort of always trying to impart in a gentle sort of, way, a lesson of some kind. And in the first book, Georgie learns, how to make right something that, that he had done wrong, how to correct a mistake, and can't necessarily fix it, but you can atone for it and make amends. And in The Egg Thief, you learn about the value of helping a neighbor and being aware of neighbors. And I had gotten a starred review for that one from Circus, and they really focused on how, and I didn't even really focus on it myself, but as other people looked at it, what they took away from it was this lesson, of how important it is. Georgie helps a neighbor pick up her eggs, and in return she gives him half, and he kind of learns that that it's important to be aware of your neighbors, an elderly neighbor perhaps that might need help. And in The Santa Thief, I really, we get so caught up in Christmas and gifts and picking out the right gift, right? Getting the perfect gift for your kids or for, a loved one. And we get so caught up on that, right? That we sometimes forget, really about the spirit of Christmas. And my dad had told me a story about, wanting a pair of ice skates. And of course, they didn't have a lot of money. And so it wasn't, there might have been a lot of disappointment there. And I wanted to be able to kind of capture that idea that, Santa can't always bring what you want, and that's okay, because Christmas is about so much more, and sometimes it's about the gifts that we give and not the gifts that we get. And that's the lesson that Georgie learns when he steals Santa's identity and in the story, and when he finds out, Christmas, Santa might not bring him what he wants, so he's really disappointed and he's pouting, how kids are, just pouting, Christmas is ruined, I'm not going to get what I want. And so Mama sends him to his room to think about it, and he gets a chance to realize that, maybe he should be doing something for the people he cares about. And so he takes it on himself to stay up all night and make some gifts and, take on Santa's identity and surprise his parents in the morning with his gifts. And I thought it was a really kind of a sweet way for for kids to get a really simple, gentle message about reminding them, that, not just to ask for things.
Right. And it is a simple, gentle message. And I think that's one of the most important things, because kids, especially, it seems like the younger the kids get, the more attuned their BS detector is, and that comes with a BS alarm, then they will let you know very quickly if something is just over the top, or
Right.
if you're, I caught you, you're trying to teach me something,
Yeah, right. Yeah, never get caught teaching, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Do you have any youngsters that you test out material on, or what's your process for making sure that you're dialed in correctly?
That's a really good question. I don't have grandkids yet. I need some grandkids to test out my picture books on. I really rely on the story and the pictures. I think the illustrations are so beautiful that I've just learned to kind of trust it, and I read it out loud. I travel all over the country and I read to kids in schools, and so I read out loud. I have my books pretty well memorized because I did 18 author talks in the last week. Okay, I was in Atlanta for 3 days, and then I was in Wisconsin for 3 days visiting schools, and I did 2 schools a day and 2 talks at a school. I'm telling you, I did this 18 times. So I know a thing or two about reading a book out to kids, and so what I typically do is I read the story out loud to myself. And I ask myself, do you like this? Does this sound right? Can you make a moment here with kids? Are they going to get this? Is there a natural, is there a natural rhythm to what you're reading? Is it flow? And so that, more than anything, is what I rely on, is that, my own sort of storytelling out loud that allows me to know if I've kind of got the right story.
And being in constant contact with children helps you to maintain, stay in tune and in touch with kind of what their sensibilities are, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. You read a lot. You look through a lot of picture books and you read a lot. And again, at this point, I guess I just trust my instincts. I've done 3 books now. The 4th one's coming out next year on the picture books. And I think at some point you kind of trust your instincts. You trust. It's a little different with an 80,000 word story. Chapter books by far are more challenging. I always have young readers read my those manuscripts before I finish them, because you're talking about a 12-year-old kid that really can kind of give you feedback whether he likes something, or if he thought something was lame, he will tell you, or she will tell you. So I definitely have beta readers, test my chapter books for me.
Sure. The Santa Thief is the new book. It is Garner tested and Garner approved. I highly recommend everybody to go out and get a copy for your youngsters. They're fabulous. They're absolutely fantastic. You said you've got a 4th one coming out. Do you have more planned,
next year I have the Circus Steve coming out, and my dad swears that they had a circus horse that they rescued that could count. It could paw the ground. If you wanted to say count to 5, it would paw the ground 5 times. I was a trained circus horse. It was pure white. And I made a story about Roxy and my dad at the circus and saving the horse, and beautiful illustrations again. I think they're going to come out amazing. So I thought maybe to do 5. I haven't quite decided yet. My illustrator just had a baby, and I won't work with anybody else but her, and so she's working a little slower. But if I can convince her to do one for 2019, there is still another story about, I haven't really touched what it was like to go to school. Everything I write always has kind of a little different element of what life was like. So, life on the farm and the chores, picking up the eggs and the egg thief, and, Christmas traditions is another way, seeing how the tree was decorated and how they celebrated Christmas. I would like to touch on school. So I kind of have some ideas. I don't want to call it the book thief, but I have some ideas, some stories that my dad told me about his school days that I would like to put together. I haven't done it yet, though.
Gotcha. What about your chapter books? Do you have a new series in mind?
I do. I really do. I don't want to feel like Rick Riordan owns all of, mythology, although a lot of publishers keep telling me that. It's like, Greek mythology's been done. Yeah, 10 years ago. Come on, it's time for some new blood,
Well, and it was done by him. It hasn't.
Exactly,
your version hasn't been told.
This should be. It's so popular. Kids
right.
consume that information. You think, well, they want to consume, a new series. And my series are a little bit different than what he does because again, I do a lot of world building. and I create a fantasy realm. So my stories tend to start here in the real world, and then you travel through a portal into the magical realm. In the case of Orkney, the Legends of Orkney series, they go to this magical place called Orkney, which is located in Asgard, home of the gods. And so I did just finish a first draft on a new manuscript called The Legends of Olympus, and it's about it's a Greek mythology story, again about a sassy 12-year-old foster kid in New York City who finds out she's a daughter of Zeus, sister of Perseus, the Perseus from Greek mythology, that had a prophecy over his head. He's the one that slayed Medusa, and grew up to slay his grandfather. The prophecy said he would one day kill his grandfather, who was king of Chryseis, and so the king sends him far away, of course, and then anyway, one day he actually accidentally does kill him, but. I thought it would be interesting. I had this idea, and sometimes this happens to authors. You just get this what if idea, and you can't let it go. And I had this idea: what if Perseus had a twin sister? What would that look like? And if she had her own prophecy? And so, I wrote the story based on that, and it's really a lot of fun. It's very, fun, fresh, sassy. Takes place in Olympus, with all the gods and monsters and action going on. So I really love it. I think it's one of the best books I've written in that genre, and I really hope to bring that out next year. If it's not next year, it'll be out the spring of the following year. And I also have a prequel series I'm working on to try to bridge the gap. I've got the picture books K through 3, and I've got the chapter books that really kind of cover, a fourth grader can read it if they're a strong reader, but it's really meant for kind of the 5th through 8th grade. So I'm trying to capture the chapter book, in between kids that read strong at 2nd to 4th grade. So I've got some shorter, not 80,000 words, but more like, 30,000 word series I'm working on that'll kind of bridge that gap. When I go to schools, I want to be able to have books for all the kids that can be excited about reading.
Love it. I love it. Alane, you're doing fascinating, fantastic work. I love everything you're doing. If people are new to your work, where can they find you online to kind of get plugged into all that you do?
I think the best place is alaneadams.com. That's my home webpage, and they can learn all about everything that I'm doing there, and about the books and the series, and how to order them, and where to see the next place I might be appearing at. All those great things.
Awesome, and keep it up. Let's knock Rick Riordan off of that pest. No, he's fantastic. We love it.
He is fantastic.
But there's plenty of room for other people to explore other aspects of it. I get frustrated with the industry sometimes that that's been done. We don't need to do that. Yeah. No, there's so much more that can be done with it. So we look forward to that.
All right, Hank.
Alane, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Mather steepled his hands. You asked to join us once? Hedwig leaned forward, eagerly. The appointed. Does that appeal? Yes. Do you even know what we do? My grandmother used to say that you control the world. That's not far off. But why? To what end? I don't know. Power? Pour me a bourbon. Mather reached into his briefcase and produced a file folder. I want to tell you one story. Have you ever heard of Centralia, Pennsylvania? No. He produced a photo for Hedwig's inspection. Spring of 1962. A pretty little town, wasn't it? Whitewash and ticky-tacky, pastel housewives and perfect lawns. A mining community, mostly. Coal. He turned over a second photo. A lovely young woman. There was a single witch in Centralia named Anna Lively. Anna had a green thumb. She could make her garden grow, whisper to a flower, and send it shooting from the ground like that. Just lovely. But she was discovered. That spring, a boy named Bobby Avery received a Bell & Howell Zoomatic movie camera for his 11th birthday. Bobby amused himself by filming his neighbors, sometimes without their knowledge, through windows and over garden fences. 12 seconds of film. Just a girl and her garden patch, and one swiftly blooming rose. It killed the town. Bobby showed it to his friends. Children believe readily. Bobby was the first to die. Parents looked into it, watched the film themselves, and they began to die. Anna disappeared. Perhaps they attacked her. Perhaps she escaped. But even in her absence, knowledge of a true witch was running wild through the population, as if Anna had beckoned it herself to grow verdant and spread. The great curse had killed 64 Centralians by the 1st of June. The footage was offered to a national news organization. That was the precipice. It might have been shown in prime time, between Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons. We came very close to another worldwide calamity, but we were fortunate. One of our own was in place at the network. He alerted his superiors, and they ended the situation. Do you know how? I'm afraid to ask. Mather laid down another photo. This is Centralia today. It was an aerial view of a forest. Endless trees and underbrush cut through by lanes of pavement. Just a maze of cracking asphalt, like the foundations of Sodom, ripped bare by the wrath of God. Only a cemetery remained, on a hill overlooking the former town. A white marble angel stood among the graves, grieving for the ruins below, like Lot's wife, turned to salt. You destroyed the whole town? Not I. This was well before my time, but yes. Just as you'd cauterize a wound to stop a patient from bleeding to death. We blamed it on an uncontrollable mine fire, deep below the earth. We actually set the coal burning, in case someone investigated. It burns today. Touch any of those streets and you'll find them hot, the asphalt melting, as if the town sat just above perdition. It's not something we're proud of, but it was necessary to save the world. Centralia, Pennsylvania, and everyone who'd seen that film had to be sacrificed. Mather collected the photos. So, that is why the appointed exist, and that is what we do. Still want to join?